Hello, space friends! We're trying something slightly new here and stretching our creative abilities in an attempt to solve a problem presented in my last video. And the P-38 Lightning heavy fighter used in World War II is the perfect inspiration for this little scenario. In my last CG animated video, we broke down what might have happened if the Empire got the prototypes for the X-Wing before the Rebel Alliance had a chance to get their hands on them. What could the Rebels do? What kind of fighter would they use instead of the X-Wing to be able to carry out their hit-and-run attacks on the Empire? If you think about it, the situation in the early days of the Pacific in World War II were kind of similar to the situation in Star Wars during the Galactic Civil War. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, the Japanese asserted military dominance all over the South Pacific, putting the United States and allies on the back foot in the Pacific theater. The United States needed a fighter with the range and speed to escort bombers such as the B-24 and B-17, and one with the firepower and endurance to be a contender against the very deadly Japanese fighters. Until the P-51 Mustang was perfected, the only fighter that could do this effectively was the P-38 Lightning, a twin-engine heavy fighter, with unmatched speed and powerful cannons in the nose. It was durable compared to its opponents, but not as maneuverable as most single-engine fighters. Now, the X-Wing I view as pretty much an analog to the P-51 Mustang, which also was fast and with the range to escort US bombers. The difference here is, if the X-Wing is like the P-51 Mustang, the Rebels get this amazing fighter about 3 years early compared to the United States in World War II. Due to all kinds of miniaturization and smart engineering, the X-Wing has a hyperdrive, shields, pretty good speed, firepower, and decent maneuverability, not quite as maneuverable as Imperial TIE fighters, but still capable nonetheless. The X-Wing could accompany Y-Wings on hit-and-run operations against Imperial shipping, bases, supply lines, and it could protect capital ships in larger-scale battles. It was only by luck and daring that the Rebels managed to get the X-Wing prototypes from the Incom engineers before the starfighter manufacturer was nationalized and folded into the Empire. And in my last Star Wars video, I talk about how the Empire might have integrated the X-Wing into their forces. But had this happened, the Rebels would have had to gone with something else. But what else? I've been thinking about this a lot. But before we get into that, yes, this video has a sponsor. Now, if you want to keep your starfighter blueprints, Death Star plans, or other sensitive information from falling into the wrong hands, I recommend NordVPN. Now, in all seriousness, NordVPN is just about as solid as you can get when it comes to protecting your own internet use while allowing you the freedom you deserve for global online usage. Isn't it annoying when certain giant online streaming conglomerates restrict access to what you can watch simply because you reside in a certain country? Well, NordVPN can change that for you, and it's really easy with just one click to open the map, designate an access location from global options, and access content from virtually anywhere. Unfortunately, the same applies to games. I once tried to gift a game to a friend in another country, but I couldn't even get him a gift card because of arbitrary restrictions. Again, NordVPN could get you around this with 59 countries to choose from. So how do you get it? You can get it through the link in the video description below. In fact, through my special link, you can get a 2 years plan with 4 months free with a huge discount. Now, this is totally risk-free with a 30-day money-back guarantee, so click that link, space friends. Before the X-Wing, the Rebels used Incom Z-95 Headhunters, a fighter frame that was good for its time during the Clone Wars, but really starting to show its age. The Z-95's inferior power plant and space frame meant its maneuverability and speed was laughable compared to Imperial TIE fighters. And what about the old ARC 170s? Yeah, these are heavy assault fighters. Too much, too heavy, too expensive probably. V-Wings? Another holdout from the Clone Wars? Maybe, but V-Wings would require a hyperspace sled or ring. And they weren't really heavy hitters either. Cloak shapes? Yeah, a bit too clunky and old. Most of the existing options just wouldn't be something that could escort the Y-Wings while also obtaining space superiority against other fighters. So I decided we needed to go back to the drawing board and design something completely new for the Rebels, something that is very much like the P-38 Lightning in World War II. I want to thank the community for helping me to come up with a name for this new fighter. I present to you the Lightning Heavy LH-38, colloquially called the LH-Wing fighter. let's preserve some logic here. The X-Wings do stand apart. The LH-Wing won't be able to do some of the things that X-Wing can do, but the LH-Wing will have some capabilities unique to itself. How would the Rebels get this fighter in production in the first place? Well, by the time the Battle of Yavin, the Rebels are already well supplied with BTL Y-Wing fighter bombers by Legionairre Manufacturing, one of the few weapons manufacturing corporations that the Rebels are able to reliably count on. It makes sense that Legionairre could also make a space superiority fighter for the Rebels. They would already be sitting on the parts, especially the power plants and engine components, which they could integrate into the LH-Wing. The power plant that runs the Y-Wing can be used in the LH-Wing's twin-engine nacelles, but with a much lighter space frame, the LH-Wing can achieve speeds far superior to the Y-Wing and the X-Wing, but not quite like the A-Wing. So we can give it a speed and acceleration about 50% greater than the Y-Wing, and 20% greater than the X-Wing or TIE LN fighter. This would be slightly better than the TIE Interceptor, but not quite as fast as an A-Wing, which is basically a cockpit with engines tacked on the back. With this kind of power yield, you've got enough to integrate deflector shields and some serious laser cannons. Here on the nose, mounted nicely in the center line, are the same Taman back laser cannons used on the Y-Wing, but here on the inner wings are some heavier laser cannons which get power directly from this power distribution area after the cockpit, which connects to the engine nacelles. In fact, this power distribution system is able to quickly transfer power to the three primary systems, those being propulsion, shields, and weapons. This means for short periods of time, the LH-Wing can turbocharge its engines for even greater speeds, or supercharge these heavy laser cannons for greater firepower. Of course, the heat buildup is enormous, so this is temporary to allow the heat to be dissipated into space. One problem this fighter might encounter due to its lack of maneuverability is overshooting the target, so I've decided this may be the only Star Wars fighter to feature large reverse thrusters here. That way, when jumping enemy fighters, it at least has the option of slowing down quickly. Now, some of you may be annoyed at me for putting what looks like laser cannons spaced far apart out here on the wingtips, meaning it has to screw around with laser convergence mechanics. But these are not laser cannons. I like the aesthetics of putting something pointy out here. I'm calling these targeting sensors. Some of you guys may be wondering what function the wings have at all. You are correct that in space they serve little function. In fact, in space, if one or both gets blown off, this is not going to affect the fighter's combat performance. In an atmosphere, while it's true most starfighters rely on repulsor lifts to stay afloat in the air, those repulsor lifts can be damaged, and even jammed in some situations. You want good old-fashioned wings to be able to fly reliably in planet atmospheres. This aligns with the Rebel missions of sometimes raiding ground bases. This is also why the LH-Wing's engines are a hybrid space and atmospheric engine with intakes, jet impellers, and all that good stuff. Now let's talk about tactics. In World War II, most American fighters could be beaten in the dogfights against more maneuverable Japanese fighters. What the P-38 Lightning had going for it was speed, endurance, and firepower. Rather than dogfighting, P-38s would take their best shot at enemy fighters, speed away before anyone could stay on their tail, turn around when out of danger, and make another lightning attack, rinse and repeat. LH-Wings would have to function the same way. To survive, they would have to avoid dogfighting TIE fighters. When working in a group escorting Y-Wings, they would need some space to make these maneuvers. They could use speed to help anyone else who gets into trouble by maintaining just enough distance to swoop in and use their speed and devastating firepower to strike like lightning, and then speed away, only to turn around and strike again. If the pilots are well trained and experienced, this is more than sufficient to supplant the X-Wing in its role. Now, of course, there are limitations. Unlike more maneuverable fighters, the LH-Wings are handicapped in limited fighting areas. So, for example, in the midst of a tightly packed convoy, debris field, shipyard area, that kind of thing, the speed becomes more of a liability in those cases. This is where an X-Wing or a TIE fighter, even if slower, would be better suited. The other issue is that, no, I did not integrate or place warhead launchers anywhere on the LH-Wing. That was one nice thing about the X-Wing, the miniaturized proton torpedo launcher. But there are mounts where such weapon additions can be added. In fact, you could put any number of external warhead launcher types here, say for concussion missiles, proton torpedoes, heavy laser cannons, who knows what. This makes the LH-Wing highly adaptable and versatile. Also, just like the Y-Wing and X-Wing, we have the integration of an astromech droid, like an R2 unit, which can make some emergency repairs, tweaks to power, and store up to 10 hyperspace jump coordinates. And finally, so that the LH-Wing doesn't take as much space in landing areas or carrier hangars, the wings fold up while landing. Overall, the LH-Wing works in this role, but the Rebels would eventually need a fighter that can compete in the dogfight. I believe even if the Empire got the X-Wing first, the Rebels would have eventually acquired the X-Wing blueprints as well. So yeah, here we are, the LH-Wing. Now it does take a lot of effort to make a ship model like this, from the mesh to shaders to animation, in about a week like I did in this case. And I have to admit, I think I often put too much work into a video that may or may not get enough views, like the video I made about Grand Admiral Thrawn's first appearance in battle and the Imperial version of the X-Wing. So I'm trying a slightly new approach and showing the creative process here. I'm always learning about how to do what I love but still make a living from it. If you want me to succeed, please give this video a like, comment for the algorithm, and share if you can. Don't forget to subscribe, and I plan to sell this LH-Wing at CG Trader, and hopefully to play with on Sketchfab as well, although I may not sell it there. Hopefully this will be up there in a few days after this video. Alright, fly daring until next time, space friends.